Okay, great. Well, let's get started here. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about how to leverage your human resources in times of crisis. So from a presenter perspective, we have a couple folks who are going to be talking today. Moving on to the next slide. So here's who the presenters are going to be. I'm going to ask Paula to introduce herself first.
Hello, I'm Paula Casey. I'm an HCM consultant for Avaap. I live outside of Dallas. I have 15 years experience in HCM consulting, 5 years as an HR manager. The last 10 years of my career have really been focused around talent management. I have a passion for talent management because you can really apply your creativity to provide strategic solutions for your business. So I hope I can share my knowledge and experiences with you today to help you do the same. Thank you for coming and spending this time with us.
That's great, Paula. Thank you. We're really excited about the content. My name is Brian Walker. I am a business development director at Avaap in our healthcare practice. Have many years of healthcare experience and helping customers look and evaluate as well as run projects around adopting new technology. So moving on to the next slide, we're certainly in a unique and unprecedented time period in our lives in so many ways, including personally, physically, and professionally, just to name a few. You know, if I think back to February, I never thought twice about making a trip to get groceries. But today, things have changed, and now I need to plan ahead. I think to myself, when is the best time to go? When will the store not be as crowded as other times, but they'll still have the food that I need? You know, if I think about this from a business perspective, we abruptly had to change course in our business environment. You know, we had to quickly think about how we're going to plan and operate in a remote environment, and how we're going to operate once we move into back into a steady state. You know, if I think about our workforce, you know, how are we looking at our human capital and planning? How are we going to do staffing, and how are we going to recruit and use technology to be more productive, to be more profitable as organizations, and to be safe as an organization as well. So this is what we're going to look at today. This is our more detailed agenda that we're going to go through. But before we jump into that and moving on to the next slide, just wanted to give you a brief overview of Avaap. As a company, we were founded in 2006, and we've grown as a technology services organization to over 600 citizens. We've worked and are working with over 300 customers, and we specialize in multiple technology platforms and partner with multiple technology organizations. Also, we are the only ProSci certified partner. For those of you not familiar with ProSci, ProSci is the industry leader in organizational change management. And we think change is one of the most important elements in helping our customers through adopting new technologies and delivering successful outcomes on their projects. So moving on to the next slide, we provide a full book of services, and starting with advisory services. And we have a firm belief that the most successful organizations are the ones who invest the time up front to really think thoughtfully about what a technology project's going to be. And we bring services around helping organizations select technology, help them get organizationally aligned so that everyone is aligned with what the goals are of a project. We help organizations with their future state business processes and helping them design them. We help them create a decision-making organization so that decisions can be made quickly and effectively throughout a project. We help with a strategy around change management and developing a change program. And we help organizations with an analytical strategy as well. From a deployment perspective, we've developed methodologies and assets based on industry best practices. And really what our goal is to help reduce risk in projects, but drive successful outcomes in those projects. From a post-production support perspective, moving on to the next slide here, we realize that your investments in these technology projects are significant. We help organizations and provide services around effectively operating in a post-production support model. How we'll help you continue to drive innovation, adopt new enhancements in order to sustain that investment that you've made. So, the services we provide, we'll partner with you before, during, and after your transformation project. So moving on to the next slide here. At Avaap, one of the things that we're really proud of is we bring some real deep industry expertise in the areas of healthcare, government, education, and manufacturing. We partner with the leading technology solutions in these industries, and we've had the privilege of working with some really great organizations and partnering with them and delivering some great outcomes for those organizations. As a company, we've been recognized with many awards for the work that we've done with our partners and our customers. We've also been recognized for many awards for the experience that our citizens here at Avaap have experienced over the years of working with them. So with that, I want to transition over to Paula, and she's going to be walking us through the details of the presentation. Paula?
Thank you, Brian. Before we get started, we want to be respectful of your time. So if you have questions or comments, feel free to put those in the chat box, and I will address those. The team will address those at the end of the webinar. Leveraging your human capital in times of crisis. Are you prepared to support your business operations in a time of crisis? Do you have a plan? Do you know what your potential challenges, do you know the potential challenges that face your business? Needless to say, this current pandemic sent most organizations scrambling to identify and meet the needs of their organization. The goal of this webinar is to help you be more strategic in the day-to-day activities and help prepare for unforeseen circumstances in the future. It's not always a negative force such as weather-related closings or fires or health crises that impact a business. Mergers, acquisitions, and market changes can cause an impact to our business. It is important to identify as best we can the right human resources to meet a changing world. Our plans don't have to be perfect. Adjustments can be made as the reality more clearly presents itself. As they say, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. So in this webinar, we're going to review some of our HR tools and methodologies we can use to better prepare for unforeseen circumstances. There's no new tools in this webinar. just hopefully a new vision for a way our tools can be used. Think of it like that ink blot test where you can see the old woman, and then if you look at it a different way, you can see the young girl. We just want to look at our tools and our capital in a different way. I was driving and I heard an advertisement that nearly made my head blow up. It was for Bambi. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this new HR service, but their motto is they can provide HR services for, I believe it was like $95 a month, and they would make HR your strength rather than your weakness. So the goal of this webinar is really to help us as professionals position ourselves in a different manner, HR professionals. Mark Cuban, the owner of the Dallas Mavericks, a really well-loved figure here in Dallas. He's been really helping a lot of the small companies during this pandemic to try to survive. He made a comment that this pandemic will create losses for some businesses and new opportunities for other businesses. I believe this pandemic provides HR professionals the opportunity to become a strategic partner with our organizations. So before we get started, I want to just take a poll, just really get the status and the feel for what we know as a community about our businesses and see where we are. So let's see how you answer these questions. Can you identify your organization's HR points of failures for delivery of your product or services? Do you know what you have to have? So why don't you go ahead and answer that question? Can you identify the 5 people in the building who would be your most regrettable losses? Okay, for those individuals who you believe to be critical to the organization's success, can you distinguish the role separate from the person? So let's see where our numbers are. I'll give you a moment to respond. And there's no wrong answers. We're just getting a feel, where are we? What's our status? Maybe you see that, we really need to get those things on our radar. Okay. So in the polling, and so we can get an idea of what our results are. %33% said they can identify their points of failure. Very good. 44 could not. 22, I don't know. Very good. The 5 people in the building who would be your most regrettable losses. That'll be interesting as we go through the webinar to see if your answers are the same at the end of the webinar. For those individuals who you believe to be critical to your organization's success, can you separate the role from the person? Very good. 67% is a good number. 33% no. Thank you. Okay. So what do we need to start getting prepared to help our organizations prepare for crisis? First thing, we need to know what are our potential crises. How do we start preparing for these unforeseen events? Well, we must first identify our critical business activities. How well do you know your business? What does it take for your business to produce its goods and services? And I think this is a really important question that's come home to us during this pandemic. What does it take to keep your doors open? You know, we're living this right now, aren't we? Do you really know your business? Let me give you an example of a client that really started taking me down this strategic HR mindset. I work for a medical manufacturer as one of my clients. They called me and asked if I would do a succession plan for them. They had been bought out by a large organization on the East Coast. Well, they were one of those organizations that people get hired and never leave, right? They've got those fabulous benefits, great work environment, and their employee base had been there for years. Well, the day they got acquired, half of their workforce could retire. The problem is they're a medical manufacturer. They have FDA compliance positions that are required for them to produce their product. So we had to put together a succession plan so they could see what resources were critical in that supply chain, what was their slate, and how they could address it. As I said earlier, it's not necessarily always negative events that have an impact on our business. One of the things in this experience is the business has to agree on what are critical or key activities. Not every activity is critical or key. For example, employee performance reviews, they're really important, but in a time of crisis, they're not critical. So this becomes a very political landscape that we have to navigate. We need to be able to identify how to support these key business activities, both for our internal organization and for our external customers. I believe HR should have the same intimate relationship with our business leaders as finance and supply chain professionals do. We should not be an afterthought. Get leadership's buy-in, become a problem solver for your business, not just a resource for employee satisfaction or enrichment. Stay tightly linked to the inner workings of your business. Get to know really what your business does. When we think about these key critical business activities in the backdrop of the pandemic, right? Who knew that working remote would be a critical business activity? This has changed our view. Our paradigms have shifted. So a good exercise might be right now, write down 3 or 4 of what you believe the critical business activities are for your organization. You know, I think one that's been really highlighted for all of us during this pandemic is the remote workforce, right? And being able to communicate to our entire workforce. Those things bounced up, and we should own those for our businesses. So maybe you could list a couple that are those critical business activities will be unique to your particular businesses. So once we have those activities defined, then we need to relate the positions that are associated to those. Keep that data relevant to the business need. Don't have generic attributes like, leadership is a good attribute to have, but if it is not connected directly into the need of the business activity, it doesn't provide a lot of value for the organization. Positions provide a collection point of all of this information. Positions, they carry the critical information like skills, expertise, certifications, compliance, SEC regulations. So we need to safeguard these for the valuable content they have for the organizations. Really, these positions become the inventory of our human capital. feel like our SQ number is to a supply chain. So don't let people just, you know, they add a new position without the thought, you know, they retire positions without understanding the knowledge base that's around them. Expertise and compliance, those are associated with our positions. But all of these things need to be reflected on the backdrop of our critical business activity. Some positions, some activities, as I mentioned earlier, my medical manufacturer, they had compliance requirements. You're going to have finance clients that have SEC requirements, or, you know, schools, the background checks. These are critical business activities that we need to make sure those compliance requirements and also any specialized expertise that's required to conduct our critical business activity is identified. So what we've learned during this pandemic, right? We needed people that could configure laptops, expand our network bandwidth. Again, against that backdrop of the critical business activity. Technology requirements. The COVID pandemic took many of us through a fire drill. Several contacts of mine in different organizations shared their stories of how their organization faced many challenges with the mandates to work remote. Not enough laptops weren't configured, network couldn't handle the numbers of employees that were remote. As we know now, remote has become our new norm. Take an inventory of your organization's capabilities. Can the network support it? Also, you need to be aware of, are there any compliance issues that need to be addressed? When I worked for a healthcare insurance company on the East Coast, for an employee to work remote, someone had to come out and certify their remote work environment to make sure it met certain standards. So in this pandemic, we've all scrambled, right, to address our business needs, but we need to come back and refine what we've done with that solution. We have a better handle now on how to work remote than we did in the past, but we need to refine and improve it. Practice. And that really ties into crisis processes and procedures. We need to identify any processes and procedures for our critical times. We've done this before. For weather-related closures and events, our employees know who to contact, where to get updates, and which business group is responsible for handling, keeping everyone informed. Are there any current processes or procedures that would potentially impede a remote solution? Are there activities that aren't supported by remote? Do we have any unidentified points of failure? So I had a client who, they had an individual in their payroll department, and his only job was taking a tape and moving it over to another machine to transfer to the FTP into the bank so those funds actually got there. Just in doing a project to enhance their processes did we learn about this individual. He never took a 2-week vacation, and that's really all he ever did was just move this tape. But only a few people knew about him. He was a potential point of failure for us if we had to do a remote payroll. So let's talk about our terms that we use. Human resource management. Human resource management is a contemporary umbrella term used to describe the management and development of an employee in an organization. It is employee-centric. It focuses on the well-being of the employee. I believe this has been the major focus of most of our HR activities. In crisis planning and preparation, HR needs to be able to shift the focus to the business. This has to be the primary focus. An employee's well-being is dependent on having a healthy business. When we talk about the human capital supply chain, this may be a new term for many of you. The term was introduced in 2009 in a book, Human Capital Supply Chains. Human capital supply chain refers to the integration of business planning, strategic workforce planning, staffing and recruiting processes, and technology to enhance the corporate productivity and profitability. The concept consolidates 30 years of expertise by companies like Walmart, Dell, and Toyota. They brought total quality management to their human resources. Their aim was to reduce their labor costs, provide strategic competitive advantage, to have the right resources at the right time. Their human capital supply chains mirrored the supply chains we are accustomed to in our business operations. By doing this, they were able to maximize their employee skills for the benefit of the organization. Their goal was to identify and deliver the right resource at the right time. We can do the same thing with our HR tools. Where I developed an interest in this strategic approach to HR, I worked for the military for a few years. The Navy knows when they pull away a ship exactly what positions are on those ships, who is filling those positions. They know how to replace those resources, who's training for those roles, and what their pipeline of potential new resources are and where they are. Having a timely, healthy, accurate human supply chain for the military is a matter of the nation's security. They referenced it as a manpower system, but really I saw it as a very efficient human capital supply chain. Unforeseen circumstances are a staple to their business environment, and they must be able to react immediately. The military uses practice drills to ensure they are prepared. We've all heard of wargaming. The lesson for us is to practice to be prepared. So let's talk about some of the things that we have in our tool bag to this problem. Here's our standard methodology that we have to leverage to solve our problems. Think outside the box. Follow the same steps that we normally follow, but tailor the methodology and solution to meet the business needs, situation, and time frame. Steps will be skipped, some condensed based on the situation, but the framework is still applicable. When we think about what we did to get our workforce up and working remote, our needs assessment wasn't so detailed, and maybe our solution design didn't have all the detail, but we were able to build and deploy to get up and running as soon as possible. Organizations were quick to react. I am sure not all the I's were dotted or T's were crossed, but we got the job done. So one of the most important things that we can do is ask the right questions, new questions. Work really closer when we're doing our needs assessment with leadership to define the right business problems to solve. What are they worried about? what is the potential crisis that they see? Don't just ask like executive levels, get down into the lines of our business, ask our business drivers. Sometimes business leaders cannot exactly tell you what they want, but they can tell you where they struggle and where their concerns are about potential risk. Ask the business user, what is your pain? What are your concerns? Are there resources you're concerned about losing? What makes your job difficult? And you'll usually find the information that you need. This is a new role for most HR professionals. Shift your paradigm from employee-centric to business-centric. Get to know your business drivers. Identify those, those individuals that are linked to those critical business activities that we have identified. Know how their activities tie directly into the critical operation components of the organization. What are the points of failure they're concerned with? Which critical resources do they have concerns about leaving? I think in all organizations these days, our network guys have bounced up that scale, right? We see how critical they are to our business. I love this Einstein quote. Ask the right questions, solve the right problem. He said, if I were given an hour in which to do a problem upon which my life depended, I would spend 40 minutes studying it, 15 minutes reviewing it, and 5 minutes solving it. I think we've just seen this demonstrated in our nation, and I don't know about all of you, but I have been in awe. With this mask shortage, we've seen YouTubes on how to use a bandana and rubber bands to create a mask. The other day I saw one where a woman took a pair of socks, shows you how to cut it up just right, create a mask out of that. We've seen airlines discuss how they can turn the middle seat to lessen exposure. And I'll tell you a story that really touched me here in Texas. We had, when the mandate came out that only 10 people could be in an area at one time, Joann's Fabrics had women standing outside their stores over 2 hours so they could get in to get material to make masks for a healthcare worker. So when people know what the problem is, that creativity to solve it, it's just magic. So be a MacGyver. Look at the tools you have in your quiver and solve your business problems. Here are some of our common HCM tools that we use for our solution designs. And if you really want to try to frame around this, it's really been on my mind lately is this remote workforce. I doubt that we've had business process mappings for that in design, and I think we really need them, and business procedures. So use these tools. Make sure we have relevant data and our integrated HCM tool set. A solution's a bit like a three-legged tool, right? We have our business processes, our business procedures, and our integrated tool set. But the glue to all of that is our data. It's what keeps it together. We cannot provide a quality solution with outdated, incomplete, or dirty data. Decisions could be harmful in a highly pressurized situation. Valuable talent could be lost, non-compliance, financial impacts. Let me give you an example. After 9/11, I was brought in to work for a client that had multiple business lines. Unfortunately, one was a cruise line. Well, as you know, the travel industry crashed. That what this organization wanted to do, they didn't want to lose their star employees in their cruise lines and keep mediocre employees in their restaurant business. So we identified those highly talented resources and help them move and track their talent appropriately that best maximize the benefit for the organization. Another example I would give you, because we're we think about crisis as something sudden that comes upon us. But if you think about like audits that happen. So I work for a healthcare provider. One day Medicare knocked on their door and they say, well, they charge Medicare so much when a registered nurse gives a shot, right? So Medicare came in and said, okay, you have charged us for a registered nurse to give the shot. Now we want you to be able to verify that that individual who gave that shot, that their license was valid at that time period. My client could not do that during the audit. They had to repay millions of dollars. So that was a crisis for them. So we designed a solution that took care of that. When you design your solution, review it and update it. Make sure that it is complete for the entire end-to-end process. A lot of times we capture processes together, but we don't go all the way to that third-party particular vendor, right, that we might be dependent upon. So make sure that you are testing the end-to-end process with your solution. Ensure that consistency, audit trails, and accountability is maintained. Identify gaps, get sign-off. Right now, I'm going to go back to the remote workforce. Organizations scammer to get people up and working. But we want to make sure that we go back and ensure that, right, data was handled properly, that our employees know how to use data, right? And if they're working from home, that compliance is being met and employee data is being protected. So we really want to come back and revisit some of these things that we have done and make sure we have accountability in place. Our human capital inventory. HR needs to be able to provide accurate, timely data on the number of people available with certain skill sets, and whether there is a sufficient bench strength in the various companies, business lines, or departments. How do we do this? We have to have consistent data standards. We have to provide timely, consistent, and up-to-date information. We need a consolidated database with a common technical platform. This provides us with the ability to identify, access, move, and track our talent. This is our human capital inventory, and it's very important. I don't know if many of you remember, there was a big lawsuit in computer world against a consulting organization because when it came Halloween, Hershey's had a supply chain where they could not find their candy. They lost, like, I think it was $11 million at that time because they couldn't locate their inventory. So we don't want that to happen with our people. We want to know to be able to get the right resource at the right time. So we have talked about HR methodologies, HCM tools, and some of our foundational data we need to support a human capital supply chain. So let's look at some more tools of what we need to do, but that we have to build this. Human resource partnering with HRIS can leverage basic traditional talent management components to create our human capital inventory chain. We've talked about many of these. Position management. This is where we're going to store our positions that have all those skills and expertise and compliance requirements attached. Positions communicate our business requirements, and they feed the other components of talent acquisition, learning and development, career planning, succession planning, and our position profile management. I cannot emphasize enough that positions should be administered and managed for the important resource they provide to the organization. Safeguard this information. It's really important. It reflects an organizational investment. Job profiles. Job profiles capture the attributes of the position. It gives us the cost, the compliance requirements, the attributes which can be tracked, compared, and measured throughout the organization and associated to the employees and each position. This is the hook that allows us to look out over our workforce and see where they can help us fit a need. Competencies. Competencies provide the detail of our human capital inventory. Companies need to be valued, they need to be tracked and measured. If they're not worth tracking and measuring, then are they really worth storing? This becomes the inventory detail we rely on to answer any crisis that our organization encounters. One of my favorite tools in working and being strategic was we talk about business activities is talent pools. Talent pools allow us to group together employees with certain skill sets. A crisis team, a community of people to develop to fulfill current or future business needs. If you don't have, when we think about these talent pools, we're thinking about them again in terms of that backdrop of those critical business activities. If you do not have the resources or time to build out detailed plans, which can be, tracked at the attribute level, group individuals together, which can address a business need. Identify a team lead to solidify the detail, just like we do the fire drills. So we're talking about our networking. I don't think anybody out there has a succession plan for our network team. Now we know what a critical business activity is. Build a talent pool. Succession management, succession plans. They provide a backdrop, a picture, a status of how our human capital stacks up against a business critical activities. Now we understand, I hope in the new light, in our new world, that succession planning is not only about developing an HR employee-centric picture of leadership, but can be used to address our key business activities. I think one of the key questions for our community to go home and answer today is, how do I keep my business open? How am I monitoring that? And succession plans are a great tool to help you with that. Talent acquisition, as we know, provides the pipeline of resources based on the data, the position data. As we're breaking down these things in our different components, it makes our talent acquisition team more informed to bring better resources to our team and to support those critical business activities. Again, those attributes and job profiles that we define come down into our training and development, and they know what their target is to help solve a problem. The goal is the right resource for the right need. That's why we use these components and put all this data in. So what we're going to do, we're going to identify in our build, we're going to identify and configure critical positions related to our solution? What is the critical business activity we are addressing? Identify and configure those attributes. Link those attributes directly to the position. That gives us the ability to track and compare our employee attributes. We can look out over our workforce and know what it takes to fulfill a need. It also allows our employees to look in and see how they can fulfill a need. Build succession plans and talent pools to support your solutions. Identify gaps in training, recruiting, and your workforce. As we go through these steps, those gaps will start revealing themselves to us. Some business challenges will require more detail than others based on the impact and the relevance to the business. Be flexible. Bringing it all together. We've talked about how succession planning and talent pools are not just tools for leadership development and designations, but valuable tools for us to group employees together to collaborate and team up to meet critical activities. People appreciate and feel valued when they directly relate their activities to the well-being and the purpose of the company. Determine whether a talent pool or a succession plan will be best for your organization. And I think for me right now, like I said, the things that are really weighing on my mind, the two activities I think that we've all come to light in this pandemic is, what do I need to keep my doors open? And this remote workforce. So we need to put those together. You can use, have a lot of time, do a talent pool initially, build out your succession plans later. So what do we get out of all this effort? The talent management deliverables that support our human capital supply chain, I think, provide some pretty key benefits for our organization. It provides a human capital inventory that's meaningful to the business. The inventory identifies characteristics for both the employee, the business, and the applicant. The human supply chain provides the employee with a keen insight of where and how they contribute to the organization. This is really important. It keeps leadership informed of the resources or any potential risk that we have, right, with certain resources. It directs the human resource development and acquisitions. It maximizes the current talent in the organization. Once we've built our plans, roll it out to the team, engage the team. Every employee wants to contribute to the success and viability of their organization. As we talk about like this networking solution, have a lead. Let them build that out for you. Work in coordination with them. Every employee wants to contribute to the success. So leverage that. Don't take everything on your shoulders. We want to create a strategy when we have a plan to make sure that our plans are maintained, that they're administered, that they're sustained over time. How we do that is to make sure our supply chain is a key component to our organization disaster recovery process. Practice, practice, practice. In summary, ask new questions, plan to plan, be prepared, do drills, become a strategic partner with your business. Know what your critical business activities are and how to keep your door open. Let's ensure Bambi won't be replacing our jobs in the future. here are some of the ways Avaap can help. And I know Brian has covered most of these, so I just want to thank you for your time today. And if you have questions, I'll let Abby take over from here. Thank you again for your time.
If you have any questions at all, please feel free to pop those into the chat and Paula will answer them. You can do that in either the chat at the very bottom of Zoom or you can do the Q&A. Either one will catch our attention, and so we'll give people a minute to type in some questions. It looks like we might have a question in the chat. Paula?
Okay.
So the question is, what is your #1 tip for human supply chain planning?
What is my #1 tip for human supply chain
Planning.
Well, I think the #1, it's the foundation. You have to know what your critical activities are. Most of our HR activities have always been centered around being employee-centric. And now we need to be business-centric. This is a different paradigm shift. If you don't know what your critical business activities are, then you don't know where the potential risks are, right? So as I mentioned earlier, like with my medical manufacturer, their concern were like FDA compliance positions that they had to have in order to open their doors. And, you know, if I think that we learned from this pandemic, it might be that network guy that you have, the only one that has a particular skill set, that if they're not available, you might have a potential point of failure there for your organization. You just need to make sure that we've identified those. But we won't know those unless we know what our critical business activities are to keep our doors open, both from a customer perspective and from an internal organizational needs.
Well, I think that's it on the questions. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and thank you Paula for presenting. We hope you learned something, and we will have a digital version of this webinar available to all attendees. It will be emailed to you, and then we will also have a version of that on our website at avaap.com. Thanks again. Have a great rest of your week.